This is the Law&Crime Network. We are in Tennessee versus Eric Boyd. Guess who's on the stand? Co-defendant, or former co-defendant, maybe co-defendant, George Thomas. Anyhow, he's getting a 76-year reduction in sentence to testify that Eric Boyd is also guilty of murder. Let's listen. So that looks like to be almost the finishing of the direct testimony of George Thomas, who has been convicted of 2 murders and multiple other charges in 2 trials because his first conviction was reversed. He is now on the stand testifying that a man named Eric Boyd was also a helpful coordinator, maybe a prime party in the killing of a Mr. Newsom, Mr. Chris Newsom. I'd like to bring my guest in to discuss this little event that's just happened in the courtroom in Tennessee. First, Gigi, you are in Florida. Gigi Teresa Gonzalez, right?
Hi, Linda. Yes, thank you for having me on today.
So happy to be on. This is your first time on Law&Crime?
Yes, it is, actually. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, we're excited to be here, too. Now, I just saw somebody just minimizing. Let's see. He wasn't there when the items were taken out of the car. He didn't even see the body. He didn't have anything to do with tying up Shannon. He didn't see any murder. But all of a sudden, out of the blue, boom, boom, boom. He's got 3 shots killing the other victim, right? Chris Newsom. What do you think about that?
You know, I think it's an excellent strategy for Mr. Thomas to minimize his participation in this event and to put all the blame on Boyd. Remember, this is someone who has been convicted of murder already. This is someone who is facing 2 life sentences plus 25 years. And his testimony today is going to determine whether or not he will be eligible to be reduced to 50 years at 85% of serving that sentence.
Well, let me just ask you one quick follow-up. Isn't there a big thing then that he should lie because he's going to get a reduction of sentence instead of like dying behind the prison bars? Maybe he'll get out with 10 or 20 years to live. It's an incentive, right?
And that is what the defense is going to be focusing on. This is someone whose life is literally on the line here. And his testimony is going to either keep him behind bars for 2 life sentences plus, or it'll give him the opportunity to potentially reunite with society in less than 50 years.
Well, let me bring my other guest in, Kirk Burkhalter. Kirk, you're a retired detective. We have about 30 seconds left. Sure. Did you buy this testimony that the prosecution is selling on this terrible, terrible case?
Not particularly.
And you're a retired detective.
Answer, yes. And one of the
Give me the one main reason.
Main reason, these acts required a high level of coordination between all these folks, and the witness was unable to speak to the details of all these items, and that that they never spoke amongst each other.
Right. You know, there's going to be so much more because I know Kirk and Gigi have more to talk about. But guess what we have to do so that we can be prepared for his cross-examination? We're going to take our quick break now. Stay with us. This is the Law&Crime Network. I'm Linda Kenney Baden, and I have great guests and a horrible trial today. Hi, welcome back to the Law&Crime Network. I'm Linda Kenney Baden. I have a panel of wonderful guests here to discuss this. While they're in Sidebar, while you're away, what happened is the cross-examination was to start. The defense attorney got up and asked for what is called Jenks material. What is that, Kirk Burkhalter, my former PD and now great lawyer?
So federal prosecutors are required to turn over statements by government witnesses. And here you have obviously several statements were made, and in particular, in meetings with the prosecutors and over the phone and so forth. And here the defense said basically that they never received this material.
Wow, that's a problem, right? You would think that in a trial for fairness, you want to give all the material that shows that this man, George Thomas, who's been convicted of 2 times of double homicide, is either a liar or a really truth-worthy angel, right?
Absolutely. Under our system of justice, the defense should be privy to all types of evidence and statements and so forth, and it's just not something that you would want to see and want to proceed, hence the sidebar that we now see.
Yeah, so Eklund Mercy, welcome today. As you know, Eklund from Georgia was in studio with me last time. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Okay.
Thank you.
You're so welcome to be here. This is a horrible case. What these people did is terrible. Now, I see the attorneys are walking back, so we may have to go to cross-examination. But I would have been embarrassed as a prosecutor to give this man a deal to lessen his time to 50 or 80% of 50 years. So how about you, Eklund?
Absolutely. But if I was his attorney, I'd be like, sing like a bird. You better sing like Patti LaBelle, and that is what he's doing. The only connection to Boyd in this case is this testimony, and they didn't do a good job. I don't even understand how it went this far. This is actually embarrassing.
Right. And in fact, indeed, Gigi, you're still with us, Gigi Gonzalez, right? You're still with us in Florida? Yeah. Now, I didn't hear anything. At the very end, as a matter of fact, the prosecutor tried to rehab in anticipation. The prosecutor said a number of things. Let me read one of them to you. It said, Mr. Boyd, you weren't there when Shannon Christian was murdered, were you? What do you think his answer was going to be? Because we know his answer was no.
Well, it sounds like it was going to be yes. And in order for Mr. Thomas to be able to put Boyd at the scene of to put a murder weapon in Boyd's hand, in order to say definitively that Boyd was a part of this conspiracy and a part of these murders, Thomas would have to be there also.
Well, he'd have to be there, but he said he was very smart, wasn't he? He said there was no DNA at the scene. There wasn't any forensic evidence connecting me, George Thomas, to the murders, and you don't have any, basically, is what he's telling everybody. So it shows he's jailhouse smart, doesn't it?
Yes, it definitely jailhouse smart, and maybe previously prepped as to what he should or shouldn't say on the stand.
Prep. Okay, Kirk Burkholder, I like the word prep. You think the prosecutor would have had what was called a proffer? That is an advance statement from this man of his testimony, more than saying, well, I just saw 3 shots, which we know there were 3 shots. It's been all over for 12 years. Sure. And poor Chris Newsom was killed by 3 shots, and now I'm putting the gun in Mr. Boyd's hand, who by the way, no one ever said was there at the time.
Yeah, this is a difficult one for the prosecution. You kind of can't have it both ways. So you can have somebody that saw everything occur but didn't participate. Usually, if someone's there, they participated in some way, shape, or form. And that's where the problem is here. And I think that the witness...
Could I just stop you? Problem here. Let's see. The rape of Shannon, the sexual degradation of her. Let's talk Eklund Mercy of Chris Newsom, the sodomy of him. People, there was bleach poured in the mouth of this poor victim, the female victim, Shannon, right? There was bleach poured in her vaginal area. He happened to leave all that out. To me, that made him unbelievable.
It sounds like a successful motion for directed verdict to me. You can't have it both ways. You can't split the baby on this one. He has to be present in order to testify to actually what happened. And he didn't state that he was there. So I don't know what type of witness this is. I think that the jury is, the prosecution is definitely confusing the jury in this case. And it doesn't make for a good trial. This was terrible.
This was terrible. Okay. I am going to have Kirk Burkholder think about the rest of the question that I want to ask him, because he and I are having a little tete-a-tete here. But right now, guess who's under cross-examination? Actually, you know what? He's still not in cross because they're still arguing. So we're going to go to a little bit of his earlier testimony. Let's listen. So that's Bernard Wagner talking about the people that fled to Georgia, and that included George Thomas, my former PD, my former police officer, now a star professor, teaches law, former trial attorney Kirk Burkholder. Is this good police work, or the defendants just fall over like we're bowling? I
think both, a little bit of both. I think it was certainly good police work. Clearly the police followed up leads. They coordinated with other agencies, which is excellent, and certainly have perpetrators that are crossing state lines. That's very important. But also, this is somewhat typical. The more perpetrators or defendants you have, the more difficult it is to keep a plan intact. And usually, quite often, you catch one person, you get one person talking, then everyone starts pointing fingers at each other. It's like the Scarecrow in The Wizard of Oz, right? So this one did it, that one did it, I'm not going down for this one, and so forth. So definitely a little bit of both.
Well, that brings me to Eklund Mercy. Eklund, then, George Thomas is arrested. He gave a statement. We heard that earlier today. Apparently, it didn't have anything to do with Eric Boyd. So where the Scarecrow wasn't pointing to Eric Boyd 12 years ago, was it?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. It just got important because, as you stated, maybe it's for the family. They are looking for people to be responsible. And, you have this Eric Boyd, this missing link. The only connection we see is through his cousin's car. So to show that, okay, it was involvement, but we don't have any concrete evidence, no direct evidence showing that Eric Boyd was involved in the murder or the rape or the disposing of the body.
So then, Gigi Gonzalez, you listened to the testimony with me, right? Earlier on his direct of Eric Boyd and all. I'm sorry, not George Thomas, about Eric Boyd. He mentioned him one time, but he never mentioned any other specifics at all. Now I suspect that Eric Boyd is about to probably almost get out of federal prison with credits and whatever else that he may have built up. Do you think that caused some pressure to go back to these defendants and say, "Let's get Eric Boyd"?
Yes, absolutely. He said Mr. Boyd is facing a federal sentence of 18 years. He will definitely see a reduction with that over time. So there's definitely a lot of pressure for these testimonies, for these defendants to come out strongly against Boyd, to ensure that all of the evidence that they are discussing goes towards Boyd and points the finger at him. So yes.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Finish your thought, please.
I'm completed. Thank you.
Okay, you're so great. I have to tell you, Eklund, this is Gigi's first time on the show, as you know. So I'm going to ask you a hard question. Also, I asked her a really hard question. Maybe I'll ask you a little softball question. So you are now the defense attorney. And you look and you see that family back there, and there's these terrible, terrible crimes. Do you talk about these crimes? Do you talk about the rape and the bleach being put into the sexual areas of Shannon and in her mouth? Do you do that, or do you try to soft pedal the cross?
No, you actually do that to show that how heinous the co-defendants are, that there was reason why Boyd didn't say anything or didn't help police trying to find Davidson. When you saw somebody just go all natural born killers on somebody who is able to really terrorize, let's be clear, we're in Tennessee. They terrorized this young white couple in Tennessee. Lord knows what you can do to Eric Boyd. So he had reason to not really help the police. However, there is nothing connecting Eric Boyd to the murders, to the rape. We only had DNA for 2 of the co-defendants, nothing for Eric Boyd. The only connection is Mr. Thomas's testimony, and that's what we don't want. I'm a fan of saying, you know what, prosecution likes to say, let's send a message, but this is not www.sendamessage.com.org.net. This is Tennessee is Eric Boyd, and make sure that they make the case, and they cannot with this type of evidence.
Well, you know, when I'm an attorney, when I was a prosecutor, defense attorney, I wanted to know what the other co-defendants said in their first statement. And indeed, we did have another statement from another co-defendant. Her name was Vanessa Coleman. And she initially was convicted. She got a retrial. She was convicted against, but got less time. She gave a statement when she was arrested or pulled over or brought down the stairs or taken into custody, whatever you want to call it, by Mr. Wagner's team. What did she say, if anything, about Eric Boyd in that statement? You know, 12 years ago, the prosecution, the government believed that he was a liar when he first said that it was Davidson and Boyd who went and killed Newsom. And then later on, he changed the story up, and now he's going with Mr. Boyd to kill Mr. Newsom. But he seems to me, Eklund Mercy, to be minimizing his involvement in everything.
Absolutely. He's had over a decade to perfect this niche. He's had 12 years to figure out what to put and not to put to incriminate himself. He has done a terrible job still, because he still, in order to say what you saw, you have to put yourself at the scene, and he has not done that.
That's okay. There's Eric Boyd. Gigi Gonzalez. The government didn't believe him 12 years ago. Why are they believing him now?
Because it fits their narrative of what's happening now. 12 years ago, they thought he was a liar. 5 years ago, they reconvened and thought this was trustworthy. Then they convicted him on 2 murders, gave him two life sentences. And now they find him to be trustworthy. And now they like what he's saying because it fits their narrative against Boyd. It puts Boyd at the scene of the crime.
And my former police officer, Kirk Burkholder, is in the studio with me. You said, wait a second. Anyway, you can't tell the difference between a 22 and 25 unless you're like a real murderer, right?
Right, or unless you handled the murder weapon and you loaded the ammunition.
Handled the murder weapon. Go ahead, tell us.
You know, 22, 25, 32, they're small caliber automatics, is automatic. So unless you're going to read the gun, but just by looking at it, I don't think the average person or even somebody that's really versed with firearms, without reading the side of the weapon, would know the difference between whether it's a 22 or a 25. So either from the news accounts or whatever the prosecutors have mentioned, or from handling the weapon or handling the ammunition.
And if George Thomas handled the weapon, he deserves to be away in those 2 life sentences, plus. Okay, so that is George Thomas saying, well, you know, Eklund Mersey says, yeah, I know the difference between principal. I wasn't a principal. You know, you won't find my DNA. You won't find anything. What did he do to stop these crimes? Eklund, can you tell me that?
Not a darn thing. And he should be, and based on his testimony, he should have been charged with misimprisonment as well. What he's done here is basically testified on his own behalf. This whole courtroom is about him and how he's magically innocent, and how the prosecutor is asking him questions about his innocence. So it's also laying the groundwork for an appeal if I was his attorney.
So Gigi Gonzalez, okay, we talked about that, the fact he seemed to say, I kind of like was there, but I didn't do anything. Like there's a 22 and a 25 gun. He knows the difference between a 22 and a 25. There's also 2 white cars, an SUV and a Sunbird, but he doesn't seem to know the difference between them, correct?
Exactly, yes. He could tell the difference between guns. He can't tell the difference between an SUV and a compact car. If I were the state, I'd be pretty disappointed, and I don't think that his testimony meets the burden of proof that the state has to prove. You know, part of him figures that this happened. He thinks this happened. You know, he guesses, and that's not good enough. You better be dang sure that Boyd is the one that was there, that this car is the one that was in front, that gun was the one that Boyd had in his hand to commit the murder. You better be sure, because this is someone's life on the line here too.
Right, and we had 2 lives taken, that terribly taken. Kirk, you were watching this with me, and you had several comments, but I want to ask you one question. Sure. Do you call Vanessa Coleman, who gave the statement back in 12 years ago, okay, 2007, and she never mentioned Eric Boyd being involved at all? Do you call her to the stand?
Sure, why not? Call her to the stand. If her testimony is that Eric was not involved, you call her to the stand. She's under oath. You understand what the truth is. You understand the penalty for perjury. Tell me the truth today. If she's going to give the story that you want that day, then that's the testimony.
And one quick thing, because we only have about 30 seconds left. George Thomas, you said he had a tell. In poker, that means, you know, he's telling something false. He's lying. What's the tell? Right,
so his tell is kind of blinks his eye a little bit, and I never did. He moves his head a lot, and you saw at the end, his testimony at the end. You know, when you're interrogating someone, you try to find a baseline when they're telling the truth, and his testimony at the end was very different from that.
Okay, so I had to get everything out of my guests. I'm Linda Kenney Baden. We are the Law&Crime Network. You have to stay tuned for the daily debrief on next. Many of us will be guests. We'll be covering the Eric Boyd trial and more.